Good stuff right there. Thank you, John. 2 Kings 25. 2 Kings 25 in verse 3. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was so severe that in the city there was no food for the people of the land. Then the city was broken into, and all the men of war fled by night by the way of the gate between the two walls beside the king's garden, though the Chaldeans were all around the city, and they went out by the way of the Arabah. First of all, this is where we are, right here. We don't get more close to the third deportation than where we are right now. We're in 2 Kings 25, which is basically our section is broken down into this, and then we are still right there. Last week we mentioned that, look, there's a time when there's going to be chaos, and yet people are going to be forced to be thinking of the song that John just mentioned, "Be still my soul, let the Lord provide," because it's chaos, and I'm hungry, and everybody's hungry, and there's bigger problems than hunger going on. Then in verse 4, the men of war fled by night. So the people that they were counting on, their own strength, yeah, we're going to win, our men of war, what we put our trust in, although they put their trust in the temple, but they also put their trust in these men, and these men just run away. So don't put your trust in your own strength. Pay attention to God. So, verse 5. But the army of the Chaldeans pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. Then they captured the king and brought him to the king of Babylon at Riblah, and he passed sentence on him. Now, if you'll keep your hand here and turn to Jeremiah 38. Jeremiah 38. So they run out in the nighttime through the wall, and then the king of Babylon catches them. Jeremiah had predicted this would happen. I say predicted, prophesied. Verse 18, Jeremiah 38:18, if you will not go out to the officers of the king of Babylon, then this city will be given over into the hand of the Chaldeans, and they will burn it with fire, and you yourself will not escape from their hand. Verse 22, behold, all the women who have been left in the palace of the king of Judah are going to be brought out to the officers of the king of Babylon. And those women will say, your close friends have misled you and overpowered you. While your feet were sunk in the mire, they turned back. They will also bring out all your wives and your sons to the Chaldeans, and you yourself will not escape from their hand, but will be seized by the hand of the king of Babylon, and this city will be burned with fire. So, now you might want to you don't need to keep your hand there. Here in 2 Kings 25, they've been captured. I wonder, first of all, anybody else impressed with the fact that what God said would happen, happened? Right? Yeah, I'm impressed, and that's why I obey him, because he can tell me what's going to happen in the future. Anybody that can do that, I obey, right? I wonder what Zedekiah was thinking as he was running away. Now, it's roughly 2 years, so probably a little less than 2 years, if my math is right, which probably isn't. But if my math is right, it's been roughly a little less than 2 years since Jeremiah had said to him, hey, if you don't go over to them now, you'll go over to them later. And here he is, he's running out at nighttime through the wall, and he's being conquered. And as he's being conquered, or before he's being conquered, what was he thinking? I'm going to get away with this? He keeps on running. He keeps on running. He keeps on running. If he's thinking, I'm going to get away with this, then I would suggest that that's no different from many informed Christians who continue in their sin. What are they thinking? Are they possibly thinking that they're going to get away with it? Verse 6, they captured the king, they brought him. Verse 7, they slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, then put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with bronze fetters, and brought him to Babylon. What's the last thing this man ever saw? his own sons slaughtered before his eyes. And then he gets his eyes poked out. Not exactly a great day for Zedekiah. Maybe some of you remember this expression. It's not an expression from the Bible, but it's a biblical idea, and that is that sin takes you further than you want to go, keeps you longer than you want to stay, and costs you more than you want to pay. His own sons. Could it have been avoided? I wonder if Zedekiah beforehand had known the impact his decisions would make on the lives and the outcomes of his children. I wonder if he would have stopped watching those television shows that he continued to watch. Or continued in that job that took him away from assembling with the congregation. I wonder if he would have continued in that, making that decision, knowing that, later on this will cause my son to grow up and be the same thing in the beginning, and then because of weakness and lack of faith fall away eventually. How about his treatment of his wife, his mistreatment of his wife? Actually, let's flip this around for a minute. Let's talk about the wife not submitting to the husband. Maybe Mrs. Zedekiah didn't submit to her husband, or didn't submit and nagged him the whole time. I wonder if she saw the effect, the impact that would have on her daughter. And if she could see her daughter doing the same thing to her daughter's husband, if she would continue to nag at him. Or if the husband has a wife who will not submit, and the husband never does anything about it, his daughter grows up seeing his wife doing this, and what does his daughter think? That's the way it is. I wonder if Zedekiah had known the impact that his just kind of playing loose with God would have. Yeah, I call on God when I want him to do something. I don't actually obey him. And do you think his children saw that? Obviously, they grew up watching that. I wonder if Zedekiah knew, if I continue this way, later on my children will be slaughtered in front of my eyes. I wonder if he would have continued that. Sadly, some people do continue that way. So, 2 Kings 25. For those of us who have come late. 2 Kings 25. Verse 7, they slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes and put out the eyes of Zedekiah and bound him with bronze fetters and brought him to Babylon. Okay, it's a sad day here. Any comments or questions on this? If not, we're going to continue on to whole verse 8. Now we're in new territory, really. Well, we have it. Now, on the 7th day of the 5th month, there was of the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord. Stop here. He burned the house of the Lord. Now, you're Bible students. You understand, and you have a spiritual awareness, and you are to be commended for that, because you know that spiritual things are the most important. And knowing that spiritual things are the most important, and understanding the Old Testament, you realize that the house of God was no small thing. It was pretty huge. There was nothing like it in the history of the world. It was where God's presence was for the Jews, for his chosen people, and his house was burned. Having read for several hundred years the house of the Lord, the temple, and before that the tabernacle, and appreciating the significance of this, when you read that, your eyes hurt because of all that's involved. We understand what's involved there. We cringe at it. At least we ought to. Let's read the rest of the verse. The king's house, so verse 9, he burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great house he burned with fire. Now let me tell you, there are some people that are more concerned with every great house being burned with fire than the Lord's house. So whatever city you've been to, there are lots of cities like this. I remember in Hungary, in Budapest, there's this one street that goes down to Heroes Square, and at the end there's this wonderful, beautiful square, and this street is lined with the mansions from the turn of the century, the previous. They're huge. They are the great houses. And boy, if they were destroyed, what's the national, the international, the historic registry, those people, they'd be up in arms. They'd be screaming, "Don't burn these houses! Don't destroy these! These are our heritage." And some people don't care when, for example, a church splits. Now, I'm not talking about the building. I'm talking about the congregation. Some people say, hey, the congregation split, and the first question out of their mouth is, yeah, but what happened to the building? Or what happened to the money that was in the building? When some person falls away, a brother has fallen, they're more concerned about the stock market falling. If we're not having some tinge of that, the house of the Lord was burned. When you read that and you don't feel something, then we need to recalibrate, right? This is a calibration passage. Verse 10. So all the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls of Jerusalem. Then the rest of the people who were left in the city, and the deserters who had deserted the king of Babylon, and the rest of the people, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away into exile. But the captain of the guard left some of the poorest in the land to be vine dressers and plowmen. Remember this for a minute later. I'm going to read through the rest of through 21. The bronze pillars which were in the house of the Lord, and the stands, and the bronze sea which were in the house of the Lord, the Chaldeans broke into pieces and carried the bronze to Babylon. They took away the pots, the shovels, the snuffers, the spoons, and all the bronze vessels which were used in the temple service. The captain of the guard also took away the fire pans and the basins, what was fine gold and what was fine silver, the two pillars, the one sea, the stands which Solomon had made for the house of the Lord. The bronze of all the vessels was beyond weight. The height of one pillar was 18 cubits, and a bronze capital was on it. The height of the capital was 3 cubits, with a network and pomegranates on the capital all around, all of bronze. And the second pillar was like these, with a network. Then the captain of the guard took Seraiah, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the second priest, with the 3 officers of the temple. From the city he took one official, who was overseer of the men of war, and 5 of the king's advisors who were found in the city, and the scribe of the captain of the army, who mustered the people of the land. The 60 men of the people of the land, who were found in the city. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. Then the king of Babylon struck them down and put them to death at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was led away into exile into its land. At this time, this map is horrible because I shrunk it so much. Can anybody remember where Edom is? Can you read where Edom is? Lower right, he says. He's pointing at it. There's Edom. But at this time, well, not this very second, but roughly at this time, Edom makes his way into this land. Okay? Notice over here, now this map is from the time of the Maccabees, from say 180 or 170 or 160 BC. So this is during the time of the Maccabees. And here we have Idumea. Can you see Edom in Idumea? Right? So that's actually a Greek Hellenized version of this Aramaic word here. And over here, this is during the time of Rome, the Roman Empire, and it's still Idumea. So from now on, like when the northern tribes were carried away, Assyria brought in transplants, Edom would just come walking into the land. Now we'll read this in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 36. Yeah, 36. Now we got to keep this in mind for Obadiah. But right now, Ezekiel 36 will refer to it. Ezekiel 36:1. And you, son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel, and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God, because the enemy has spoken against you. Aha! The everlasting heights have become our possession. Well, who's the enemy? I'm going to skip down to verse 5. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, surely in the fire of my jealousy, I have spoken against the rest of the nations and against all Edom, who appropriated my land for themselves as a possession with wholehearted joy, with scorn of soul, to drive it out for a prey. Obadiah will refer to this. We'll get to Obadiah in a while. But right now, when the poor are left in the land to be vine dressers, in comes Edom, and from now on, or almost now on, it will be known as Edomia. Just remember that. Question for you really quickly. When Jehovah God allowed his people to be taken away by the servants of Baal God and Nebu God, what did the people think about Jehovah God? What?
He lost.
He lost.
He was weaker than the
If he is a he is weaker. He's weak. That's the mentality. That's God uses that mentality throughout this. Okay, so God uses. So they're thinking Jehovah is weak. Can God let that stand? So even if we hadn't read the rest of Jeremiah 25, Jeremiah 29, or any of the rest, what do we know is going to happen? In fact, he'll talk about it right here. Ezekiel 36, verse 6, therefore prophesy concerning the land of Israel, say to the mountains, verse 7, I have sworn that surely the nations which are around you themselves will endure their insults. But you, O mountains of Israel, you will put forth your branches and bear your fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come. Behold, I am for you, and I will turn to you, and you will be cultivated and sown. I will multiply men on you, all the house of Israel, all of it. And the cities will be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt. I will multiply on you man and beast. They will increase to be fruitful, and I will cause you to be inhabited as you were formerly, and will treat you better than at the first. Now listen. Thus you will know that I am the Lord. Some 52, 55 times in this book alone, they will know I am the Lord. They will know I am the Lord. This whole thing is a setup so that God can broadcast to the whole world that they will know that he is the Lord. Having said that, so we have the grand scheme. What is God doing? We understand the grand scheme of what he's doing. All right. Having said that, did he allow them for a while to think he was weak? Basically. For a little while, for another, 50 years?
If they had been paying enough attention, they would have known. But
right. If they had paid attention, they would have known. Exactly. But that relies on them paying attention, and they ain't paying attention, right? Otherwise, they would have left them alone to begin with. My point here, and this is somewhat of a jump, but understand this, God sometimes, following God's plan, we will look weak. Sometimes when we follow God's plan, we will look weak. Now there are some people who do not like. Guys, what's the challenge that we cannot avoid this challenge? I'll bet you can't fill in the blank. I'll bet you can't. And we're automatically, we must now do whatever it is that somebody said we can't. Because we cannot handle looking weak. We can't handle it. So this is my point for those of us who think like that. Look, there are some times when, to be pleasing to God, we will look weak. Here's a couple, first, 2 Corinthians 13. Jesus, when he was on the cross, what did they say to him? Save himself. And they use the word, you are unable to. That's the word they use of him. He cannot. He saved others. He is unable to save himself, right? He's unable to. It looked that way while he was on the cross, didn't it? 2 Corinthians 13, verse 14. He was crucified because of weakness. Oh, really? He was crucified because of weakness? No. He wasn't actually weak, but it sure did. 2 Corinthians 13:3 or 4? 4, sorry. He was crucified because of weakness, yet he lives because of power. We also are weak in him. Paul, this is the end of a defense that Paul is making. Some people are saying, Paul's not an apostle. Why not? Look at all the bad things that have happened to him. And he says, no, and now he uses this word over and over. I'm weak. I'm strong in my weakness. Jesus Christ. He was crucified because of weakness. Really? What didn't he do? What did he do? He submitted his will to God's, the Father's. And when he submitted, could he have called out the angels? And that, yes, but he didn't. Why? Because he submitted his will to the Father's, and that is when he looked weak. Oh yeah, he looks like the epitome of weakness up there. But in reality, it was the strongest thing that had ever happened on the face of the earth. We tell our children, don't hit back. But I'll look weak. Yeah, you might look weak, but in reality, you're stronger than they are. 1 Corinthians 9. I don't mean to monologue. Somebody's got a point. I'll just monologue for another 30 seconds. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Remember, Paul says, if food causes my brother to stumble, I'll never eat meat again. That's the context. Look, I'm not going to eat meat. For whom would he not eat the meat? For the person who was what? Weak. It's the same word. Verse 12 of chapter 8, verse 12. By sinning against the brethren and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. So Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:22, to the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. Why don't you exercise your right? You can do this. God allows you to. And in fact, when you don't, you look weak. Yeah, I'll take it. Guilty. Again, he looks weak when he is submitting his will to God's. That's both of these contexts here. Now, ladies, this one's for you. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 1. Wives, be submissive to your husbands. Verse 5. Being submissive to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham. I can't pick on my wife very much here, because she was trained from her youth to be submissive to her husband. And she does a good job of it, I think. That's right, honey. However, my mother she does not come from the same kind of training. As an illustration of this, my mom comes from almost the closest thing you can come to royalty without actually getting to, those movies they make about, England over there, what is it, Pride and Prejudice and all those people. My mom's ancestors would have been among them, not the royalty, but they would have been at the parties, okay? And they didn't really teach women submit to your husbands there, although that was kind of there, it wasn't really there, right? Now, I can illustrate this with my mom's mom, if I remember this correctly, got kicked out of a religious organization multiple times for being what? Rebellious. For being rebellious. All this to say, my mom didn't have the same kind of training. And so for my mom to submit to my dad is a lot, I'm guessing, more difficult because it's not in the background of her. And so when she does, because guess what? My mom's not dumb. She's got good ideas, just like the rest of you women. And so when you've got this good idea because you're not dumb and your husband says this dumb idea because he isn't so smart at the very moment, and you submit to him, it looks, what does our world now in America want? You look at the movies. There are categories of movies with a strong female lead. We need a strong female, and you see it in all the Avengers, right? There's always the strong female lead right there. That's what we're looking for. And so when you women here are submitting to your husbands, you look what? Weak. I'm guessing, actually, this is my opinion, that in verse 7, when it says as someone who's weaker, I actually think that's what that's talking about. I could be wrong about it. I know I'm right in verses 1 through 6. When you women submit to your husbands, you look weak. But well, guess what? For God, do it. Keep it up. Comments or questions on this? I know I kind of jumped, but I used that as a springboard, if you don't mind.
Of all places, in the discussion here about the temple being destroyed. So at this point, with perhaps the exception
George,
of...
you need to calm down.
Okay.
Heart.
With the exception, perhaps, of a couple successful skirmishes when they were defending the rebuilding of the wall, for example, there are no military victories for Israel from here on out, right?
Pretty much.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a great place to go. In my mind, I could be wrong. When people are saying, well, the Bible is just written by a man who wanted to prove that, who wanted to create this fictitious person that people could believe in.
Right.
This sure seems like a stinky way to go about that. And it makes me
We're a
think
bunch of losers. Follow us.
Right, exactly. It makes me think of Dawkins, and I pulled up the statement here. The God of the Old Testament is arguably
Yeah.
and then he goes and mentions things that are basically a man trying to look strong.
Right. Right.
Well, sir, here you are. And if you go to the New Testament, it doesn't look a whole lot better.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. The God who died on the cross.
It really doesn't.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah. Good points. Okay. We'll move on from there. Before we go on too far, that Israel is out of the land, and Edom's in the land, but primarily, and others are in the land, but that Israel is out of the land, is that any big surprise? Why not?
Promised it from the moment they entered.
Right. From before they entered. Before they entered. When you go in the land, unless you act faithfully. So we do have a parallel. John 12. He who rejects me, verse 48, he who rejects me and does not receive my sayings has one who judges him. And what is that? The word I spoke is what will judge him on the last day. There will be no, it's not like, and by the way, where is this Bible translated? Everywhere. It's on everybody's coffee table. They know about it. So when they get before God in judgment, they won't be able to say, oh, I didn't know, I didn't have access, I didn't have opportunity. God will take care of that for them. Comments or questions here? Jonathan.
Regarding us sort of behaving weak for the benefit of others, kind of thing. I mean, we're strong, but we act or are seen as weak. I think that kind of comes down to, though we do have some level of strength in ourselves, if what we're doing causes somebody else to stumble, that's a problem, and we need to reel back on that strength that we might have in that area, because though we may have the strength, through that we incur a burden for someone else that we are not strong enough
Right.
for. So I cause someone else to sin because I've eaten meat. Well, I wouldn't have to worry about that. I could do that all day long. If he could say, I don't need to trust in God because you can save me, then I could do that. Then I could say, look, it doesn't matter what God wants you to do because you can trust in me instead. So I'll just do it. But that is not a strength that we have.
Yeah.
That's a strength that only God has. So you sort of play this game of, ooh, I'm strong, and maybe a little bit, but only a very little bit, and you cause problems for someone else far beyond what your tiny little strength can handle.
Right. Yeah, not acting in a way that will seem to others to be weak is out of pride often. Right. In that scenario, it would be out of pride.
We actually are weak because we can't solve the
Right.
problems that we cause.
Right.
In other words, I'm strong enough to eat this. I'm just not strong enough to think about my brother.
Yes. Yeah. Dad, you want to say something? I can. Oh, he did. Oh, I'll hear it on the way home. That's what's going to happen.
No.
Okay. All right. So here we are in verses 22 through 24. Kind of done with there. Yeah. Verse 22. Now, as for the people who were left in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had left, he appointed Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, over them. Now we'll read more about Gedaliah another time, but right now just very little. When all the captains of the forces, they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah governor, they came to Gedaliah, to Mizpah. I'll skip the names for now. Verse 24. Gedaliah swore to them and their men and said to them, "Do not be afraid of the servants of the Chaldeans. Live in the land, serve the king of Babylon, and it will be well with you." May I suggest that this is advice timeless. And I find it interesting. What's Jeremiah? Yeah, I'm sorry. He's not in. I'm getting confused where I am right now in the text, right? But what does Jeremiah say to those who are in Babylon? Same thing. You know, marry, do well, seek the wellness or seek the good of the town that you're living in, and that it'll go well. So they're saying the same thing, really. Okay. Having said this, in verse 2, in verse 23, the captains of the forces and their men came to Gedaliah. Now, these captains had just spent years doing what? Fighting. That's what they do. They fight. They'd spent years fighting. And then, when they were finally losing, what did most of them try to do? Flight. So in their mind, they're either fight or flight. And what are they told to do? Stay and take on a job as a vine dresser and a plowman with the poorest of the land. Now, allow me the assumption that one of these people had faith. One of them said, "You know what? It's time to. Jeremiah's been right. I'm gonna do what he says." And he's out there and he's vine dressing and he's plowing, but in his instinct is what? Doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Did I just take the right job? What's the answer? Yes, you did. You took the right job. The other job that you're thinking about is the bad job. That's not, but they have a moment of doubt. They have this doubt. I want to look over here. I want to look over here because this one appeals to me. This is what I'm used to. I think I can succeed here. This is where I think everything will go well. And in reality, what do they need? They need to trust God and submit what? Their will to His. And that's the way, and then have faith. Have faith to overcome those urges that I'm not content. I do not trust that this is the right answer. I don't trust this is the right answer. No, it is the right answer. That's the struggle. It's not like we face anything new, right? It's the same struggle. They have to have the faith to overcome it. Anybody, anything else? Yep.
That's a really good point.
He'll repeat that. He said it's a really good point.
It's extremely applicable in my mind. Because I notice myself, and maybe others, but I definitely notice myself, trying very hard to quickly get to a point where I feel like I've established what I want around me, and that can kind of sail through. Whether it's one of the reasons I didn't want to have more children, okay? Because we've got, and I can kind of bask in the glory of whatever occasional success comes along from this, and I know what I'm dealing with. Nothing's changed for me here, you know. In that sense, it's the same thing with the house. If I can just get it fixed up, then I'll just always live here, and I won't have to move again, or I won't have to. You know, I'm surrounded by the things that I have established and made work for me, and now it can be done. And every time I learn that that's not the way it's supposed to go, it's really hard. But it's not the way it's supposed to go, and there's that is where I need to work.
Yeah. Faith in being content with whatever.
Because you got to discover that what you're in right now could be temporary, even if you're trying very hard to make it permanent. And when you can realize that it could be temporary, your perspective changes.
Or it could be permanent.
Or it could be permanent.
You want it to be temporary.
Or it could be permanent.
Whichever, the point. Dan.
I don't know if you've already covered this, or you're going to cover it. Did you look in Habakkuk?
No.
Are you going to?
Nope.
Uh,
Yes, right now.
Okay, in Habakkuk 1, the Chaldeans are coming. Verse 6, lo, I am
Yeah.
rousing the Chaldeans. They're coming, they're coming. I don't know how far in advance that Habakkuk says this, but somewhere prior to Nebuchadnezzar coming. So they're coming and they're going to make a horrible mess of Jerusalem. And in chapter 2, the verse 4, which is quoted several times in the New Testament, behold, he whose soul is not upright in him shall fail, but the righteous shall live by his faith. And I always thought that the context is, here comes the Chaldeans. You can live by faith, but how? Jeremiah, I assume you already mentioned, told them, give up and go out.
You're right.
Just open the gates, go out, and you'll live.
Right.
But that looked like crazy.
Yeah, illogical.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
You had to accept that by faith.
Right.
And I think.
No, I agree. I think you made the same point last time you were here. Somebody made this point. Yeah, it can be made it again. It's one of your favorite. Yeah, or maybe you made it to me at home. See, he does that. He's like, okay, Lee. Okay, good point.
So these people that you were talking about, the vine dressers and all, they had to do that by faith.
Right.
Stay there and everything will be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. So our parallel in 2 Chronicles 36, because after all, this is, if you look at the title of, yes, a parallel study. Okay, 2 Chronicles 36. For the sake of time, I will not read, well, I guess, I don't know. Verse 11, Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke for the Lord. Remember that word, spoke. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear allegiance by God. But he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against him, turning to the Lord, and hardened his heart against turning to the Lord God of Israel. Furthermore, all the officials of the priest and the people were very unfaithful. Everybody is unfaithful. Okay, well, how did we get into the mess? Everybody is unfaithful. The top down to the bottom, those who are civic and religious leaders, and those who are religious leaders, and everybody's a mess. Verse 15, the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again. Stop now. They had problems. What was God's answer? Or what was God's reaction? They've got problems. They're not obeying me. What does God do? According to this text, he gives them a word, right? And I realize that other passages talk about famines and wild beasts and all. So God's throwing everything at them, including the word. You need more of the word. So when people have a problem obeying the word, what do they need? More of the word. And in fact, they need the word what? Again and again. They need more of the word by his messengers. Because he had, here they come. Here comes Jonathan again. He's got to say the same thing to me again about what I know is wrong. And he's just got this soapbox that I've got this problem. And I wish he'd lay off my back. I wonder why he does it. God sent them again and again. Verse 15, why? Because he had compassion on the people. I love you. I don't want you to die. So you need the word again and again and again. But they continually mocked the messengers. That they were continually mocking the messengers means that they were mocking the messengers. And what did he do when they mocked the messengers? What did he do for them? He sent them the word. Here you go. Here's more of the word. The word comes again. They despised his words and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, until there was no remedy. So, as much as the word is what is necessary for turning anybody who's disobeying the word around, turning them around, it only works when? When they'll accept it. That's the only time it'll work. Hebrews 4:2, right? The word was not... Yeah, that was all Sunday that we read that, so I can't remember that far back. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2, was not united. The word they heard did not profit them because it was not united by faith in those who heard. So God can send the word all day long, but in order for that word to work, I have to believe it. And so when the word doesn't get this person to stop, whose fault is that? The word didn't get this person to stop his sin. Whose fault is that? That person's. And that person's alone. It's not God's fault, right? Okay. Comment or question on this? Jonathan?
Words still work to fight people who are obedient and people who aren't.
Say it again, I didn't hear
I
it.
said the word is still work.
Yes. Right. 1 Corinthians 11. These separations are necessary. I will say this. Now we know they all get dragged off again, right? What does it say in verse 20? Those who had escaped the sword, he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and his sons. Have you... What?
You must have paid him.
Yes, paid working servants, right? Now, if you read the prophets and back in Deuteronomy, you get the impression that if they're obedient, who will be working for whom? If they are obedient, the nations will be working for them, and they'll be driving them away. The nations will be running away scared. The only way for Israelites to be servants of anybody else was for what? The only way for Israelites to become servants to anybody else, what first had to have happened?
Just reject God.
Reject God, disobedience, right? Do you know of a passage anywhere that says, look, sinning makes you a slave? Yeah. Romans 6. Here is a literal illustration. If you sin, you will become a slave. Wham! They're slaves, right? Our enemy is not against flesh and blood. We don't fight against Satan. No, we don't fight against Nebuchadnezzar. Our enemy is Satan. Comments or questions on our little recap? I can tell some people are tired. We're stopping now because we've gone an hour. John went long. Thank you for your work. I hope that we sing that song that you sung or you provided. I don't know who's...
I'll sing it, but I won't lead it. So. Pretty standing up and inhaling deeply.